I'm rolling out this new concept that I'm really excited about, and it's called the vacuum principle. And it's based upon the fact that our brain does what it does really well. And what it does is it constantly searches for vulnerabilities. It does that in our conscious and our awareness, and it also does it in our subconscious. And that's kind of the problem. Because what our brain does is that when we experience conflict, when we feel it, we will look into our current surroundings to try to explain what it is. And the first part of the principle says is that we will exhaust all those possibilities until we find out what the problem is. But that's not where it's coming from. It's not coming from our surrounding, it's coming from within us. And the second part of the principle says the way that we're going to explain it is 4 different ways. It's going to be I suck, you suck, the future sucks, or the world sucks. In all cases, again, none of those things suck. It's actually your brain that sucks because it's unreliable at times and it misleads you. And it's telling you when there's conflict when there really isn't any. More details coming soon. Before I go any further with the vacuum principle, I want to talk specifically about the fact that our brain is unreliable, what I'm calling your brain sucks. And in this case, I want to come up with a specific example around the I suck concept. And it goes like this. You're talking to someone and they say something that bothers you. Maybe they disagree with your opinion on something. Maybe they make some criticism about your job or an outfit you're wearing. Whatever it is. The point is that at that point in time that you experience conflict. You feel a physical sensation inside you that's telling you that you are being attacked. Now, there's no real physical attack that's going on, but it's actually an emotional attack. And what this is, portraying to you is that you are emotionally vulnerable in what area. Now, we know that this is not, the same for everyone. It is a very common experience, what I just talked about, but everyone experiences it differently. Some people are really sensitive, and some people are, pretty thick-skinned. So up next, I'm going to talk about how this originates and how we learn to experience conflict. To understand the origins of the vacuum principle, there are a couple of things from a neuroscience and a psychology perspective that I'm going to cover. The first is the fact that when we're born, we have like 100 billion neurons in our head, except very few of them are connected. However, by age 3, all of those neurons have either joined together in what are called synapses, or they have been pruned away. And this period is called Exuberant Synaptogenesis. And basically what that tells you is that our 1.0 version of our brain is basically in place by the time we're age 3. What psychology tells you is that there's a similar period that kind of parallels that, and it's called attachment, which you've probably heard before. And more each day, we're learning just how profound an impact that attachment period has on everything that happens to us later on in life. So, the first part of this development is understanding that there is a huge amount of stuff that's going on by age 3. I'll talk about what next. We know that we're born with emotions, or more accurately put, we know that we're born with emotional responses. And by that I mean we can see an infant experience things in its environment. It can see something, it can hear something, it can feel something, whatever, and it can experience pleasure or pain internally as a result, and you can see some behavior. For example, if there's a loud noise, it can get scared and it might cry. Or you can pick it up and hold it lovingly and it will smile, right? So very clearly, infants have emotions. At the same time, we know that there is no higher level reasoning at first. And that's a key thing because we use our emotions, or at least our caregivers do, to train our higher level reasoning, right? We get meaning through the world and we learn things about life by initially via our emotions, experiencing the pleasure and pain of approval and disapproval. At the same time, we're also giving meaning to our emotions, and that's what I'm going to talk about next in building blocks. So as newborns, our caregivers will use our emotions to train our higher level reasoning, basically to give us the information we need to operate in a greater world. That's from a logical standpoint. But we also need to have this kind of behavioral incentive to make sure that we do the right thing, to make sure that we balance our own selfish needs and wants with the rights and needs of others, right? And the way that they do that is using what I call emotional building blocks, or also known as inhibitory emotions. And they are this. They are guilt, shame, fear, and worry. And, I'll go into some examples in the future, but basically using these emotions, our caregivers are able to teach us how to operate as independent human beings, making sure that we are taking care of ourselves, but also looking out for and considering others. Up next, I'm going to talk about what happens when one of these things gets skewed and we don't see reality properly. To show how problems with our building blocks cause us to obscure reality, I'm going to go back to the example that I spoke about in video number 2, where someone said something that bothered us. So you're having a conversation, maybe they disagree with your opinion, or they make a comment about your job or something like that. What's happening is that you're questioning who you are because of their comment. You're feeling maybe weak, maybe you're feeling dumb or dishonest, whatever it is. So what shame is normally supposed to do is that when we do something that's not appropriate, right, we're supposed to feel bad, and that's okay. But in this instance, we're experiencing shame when we really shouldn't, right? We should know who we are as a person. We should know that we're imperfect and we know what our flaws are. And when someone says something that's either true, we should accept it, or if it's not true, we should dismiss it. But we don't. So what happens is that the shame, the inhibitory emotion, gets out of whack. Up next, I'll explain how that happens. To make more sense of the building block approach, I'm going to give you some context as to how I came up with it to tie everything together, and that will explain the chart that I'm about to show you. And it's this. In early 2017, I had developed the basis of the Foresight Model, and that said that people who were depressed inaccurately looked at the past, and people who were anxious inaccurately looked at the future. And people with more severe mental health issues had either extreme issues in one of those areas or problems in both. And it was at that time I started to figure out, knowing this psychology and neuroscience background, I was wondering, well, how did an infant develop these basic skills and why do they not get them correct? And I came up with this chart. And it says that basically there are things an infant needs to learn that it should do and it shouldn't do. And in both cases, that it will either fail or succeed when it does one of those things. And the parents need to respond appropriately in order to imbue in them one of these emotional building blocks. And I'll talk about parenting, overparenting, underparenting next. Welcome to the vacuum principle video that ties everything together. At this point, we know that we have the 4 emotions building blocks: guilt, shame, worry, and fear. And that when they're properly balanced in an adult, they drive appropriate behavior. And we also have this chart that shows roughly how caregivers imbue these emotions in an infant to make sure that they have them in proper balance as an adult. Now, with a little more critical thinking, I came up with this theory behind how these skills might be skewed in an adult because of under or over parenting. And that's the chart that you see here. It was at this point in early 2018 that I effectively began my own personal clinical trials. I spoke to hundreds of people and found out what the recurring conflict was in their life. I then figured out what the associated emotional building block was and forecasted to them what their under or over parenting situation was in their childhood. In 100% of cases, I was correct. The best part was that those who I coached in depth, I was able to give them this knowledge and change their behavior. Effectively, I created a new approach to mental health.